Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I do have thank the panel and do have a couple of questions. Dr. Martin, in your testimony, you say that the goals of the RFS, Renewable Fuel Standards, are more biofuels, better biofuels, and beyond biofuels. If you take a step back, you want to talk about what some of the broader policy goals are besides just biofuel?
Sure, absolutely. And it was beyond food-based biofuels, not beyond biofuels as the third goal. So the overall goal is to cut our oil use. As I was just alluding, the challenges that our oil use causes to our economy, to our security, and to our climate are substantial, and the best way to address those are to take practical steps to cut our oil use.
All right, so you're basically saying cleaner air, more domestic production, and doing away with the need for importing oil. Would that be fair?
We can cut our oil use dramatically, yes.
All right. What about, so let me go to Mr. Pugliarosi. You're talking about coming up on the blend wall. So as we have less use of fossil fuels, we're coming up on the blend wall, which means we have to use more ethanol than we can blend at a reasonable percentage.
Yes.
Is that correct? I guess what I'm getting at is, aren't we kind of on a collision course with ourselves as we promote more fuel-efficient vehicles, and then as we move to alternative electric cars, or as we move to natural gas-powered vehicles? It's going to get worse and worse over time, isn't it?
Well, I think, we sort of get stuck on these volumetric or these mandates instead of looking at how do we want the economy to function most efficiently to get the most economic growth.
Right.
And if we try to wrench the economy too fast, to very high cost, and often infeasible fuels, we're going to impose a very large cost.
All right, let's talk a little bit about natural gas. I can go out and buy a natural gas-powered pickup truck for about $6,000 to $9,000 more than a normal pickup truck. Much more clean burning than oil-based, and it's economical for me. Once I hit 90,000 miles on that truck, I will have paid for it and will be saving money every time. So why shouldn't we be focusing some of the efforts there?
You're asking a very good question, because is this mandate really a cost-competitive or a low-cost strategy
compared to something like natural gas,
compared to the other things that are out there? And the answer to that is probably not.
All right, Mr. Gerald, you represent the oil and gas industry. We've got great technological breakthroughs in hydraulic fracking, and we're all but giving away natural gas. What's gas today? It's in $4 range.
Yeah, give or take.
And do you see any substantial increase in that over the next few years?
Well, if you look at the quick history of this, which has literally occurred in the past few years in the United States, once again, calling into question the assumptions under the Renewable Fuel Standard, which was a very different day. But when you look at natural gas today, going back to this broader objective, if we talk about climate issues and carbon emissions.
Cleaner and domestic.
Well, today we're at 1994 levels for our carbon emissions. Why is that? Because of natural gas. That was driven by the marketplace, not by a government mandate.
And we're within Kyoto standards for now, right? Didn't we get there? Even though we're not a signatory?
We're getting very close to that as the leader in the world in terms of reducing our carbon emissions. But the market brought it about, and that's why we've got to take away some of these efforts to compel technology. The movement to natural gas in vehicles is occurring for all the reasons.
No government involvement.
Precisely. And that will happen. That's what we need to inject back into this conversation.
And just as far as projected reserves of natural gas, we in trouble in 5 years?
It depends on whose estimates you look at, anywhere from 100 to 250
All right, so we're talking a couple of 100 years.
At least.
So it kind of takes the heat off developing.
That number keeps growing every year.
All right, so it kind of takes the heat off of some of these numbers. And just let me go with one question with respect to food prices. These renewable food standards, they're affecting meat, poultry, your turkeys, chickens, you name it. It's also affecting just corn for people, isn't it? I mean, worldwide?
It certainly is. I think Ms. Norton made a very good point, about the impact, and we would agree. I mean, we've talked a lot about the impact on our on our energy here, and we ought to talk about the impact on people who are facing food insecurity as well.
And in other countries, particularly where not as wealthy as we are, substantial increase in corn prices. I mean, corn is a part of the staples in many countries. I think in Mexico there was one study that said since the renewable fuel standard took effect, tortilla prices are up 69%.
There's actually civil unrest at times in Mexico over the corn prices. There have been demonstrations there. But it is other countries, but it's also the food insecure in this country as well that are affected by this.
So I see I'm out of time. I just want to conclude by saying we really do need to take a step back and see if we can solve some of our energy problems and our environmental problems in the marketplace with technology that's there today rather than trying to force something. So I'll yield back.